Picture this. You are standing on a hillside in Turkey as the first light of dawn touches ancient stones. The air is cool and still, carrying the scent of wild herbs and earth that has held secrets for millennia. These aren't just any stones, they are massive pillars, each one taller than 3 people standing on each other's shoulders, carved with intricate images of animals and symbols that seem to dance in the shifting light. They are arranged in perfect circles like a stone symphony frozen in time. They have been here for 12,000 years, built before humans learned to farm, before they invented the wheel, before they created the first cities we know of. Yet someone, somewhere in the distant past, decided this place was sacred enough to move stones weighing 16 tons without machines, without metal tools, with nothing but human hands and an inexplicable vision that drove them to create something extraordinary. For centuries, we believed we knew exactly when civilization began. Somewhere around 6,000 years ago, the story went, humans finally figured out how to build cities, create writing systems, and organize complex societies. Before that, we were told, there were only small bands of hunter-gatherers, surviving day to day, following herds and seasons, leaving little trace of their existence beyond scattered tools and bones. It was a neat, tidy timeline that made sense of our past, a story of steady progress from caves to skyscrapers, from fire to flight. But scattered across our planet are whispers of something else, something older, something that doesn't fit the story we've been telling ourselves for generations. There are structures built with precision that rivals modern engineering, created by people who supposedly had no knowledge of mathematics or astronomy. There are carvings depicting sophisticated understanding of the cosmos, made before the invention of agriculture. There are entire cities resting beneath the waves, drowned by rising seas at the end of the last ice age, their streets and temples now home to fish instead of families. In the highlands of Bolivia, massive stone blocks fit together so perfectly that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them, cut and shaped with techniques that baffle modern engineers. Off the coast of Japan, underwater terraces descend into the deep like the steps of some forgotten giant staircase. In Turkey and Syria, circular temples emerge from the earth like stone flowers, their purpose and meaning lost to time, but their craftsmanship speaking of minds that understood geometry, astronomy, and the movement of the stars. These discoveries aren't just curious anomalies or interesting footnotes to the main story of human development. They are echoes of voices from a time we thought was silent. They suggest that human history might stretch back much further than we ever imagined, that our ancestors might have been far more capable, far more organized, far more wise than we have given them credit for. What if the story of civilization isn't a steady climb from primitive to advanced, but rather a series of peaks and valleys, of knowledge gained and lost, of entire worlds that flourished and then vanished, leaving only fragments for us to puzzle over like pieces of a vast, broken mirror? Consider the possibility that we are not the first to gaze up at the stars and wonder about our place in the universe, that we are not the first to organize large groups of people to build something beautiful and lasting, that we are not the first to create art, to worship, to dream of immortality through stone and story. What if we are simply the latest chapter in a much longer book, one whose earlier pages have been torn out by time, weather, and the restless movement of the earth itself? Tonight, we will journey to these forgotten places. We will walk among ruins that challenge everything we think we know about our past. We will listen to stories carved in stone and written in the arrangement of massive blocks that somehow found their way to hilltops and ocean floors. We will explore the possibility that beneath our feet, beneath the oceans, beneath the comfortable certainty of our history books, lie the remnants of civilizations that time tried to erase but could not completely destroy. These are the echoes in the stone, waiting patiently through centuries and millennia to tell their stories to anyone willing to listen, to anyone brave enough to imagine that human history might be far stranger, far older, and far more wonderful than we have dared to believe. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through time, past the familiar landmarks of recorded history, into the deep past where mystery and possibility still live, where every discovery raises more questions than it answers, and where the stones themselves are the only witnesses to truths we are only beginning to understand. Imagine walking across a barren hillside in southeastern Turkey, where the wind carries dust from ancient lands and the horizon stretches endlessly under a vast sky. For thousands of years, local shepherds knew this place as Potbelly Hill, nothing more than a gentle rise in the landscape where they could graze their flocks. But beneath their feet lay something that would change everything we thought we knew about our earliest ancestors. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt arrived at this unremarkable hill called Göbekli Tepe. What he found there defied every assumption about prehistoric humanity. As his team carefully brushed away centuries of soil, massive stone pillars began to emerge from the earth like sleeping giants awakening from a dream. These weren't rough, primitive monuments. They were sophisticated works of art, carved with incredible precision and decorated with images that seemed to tell stories we could barely begin to understand. The pillars themselves are breathtaking. Each one stands as tall as a two-story building, carved from single blocks of limestone that weigh up to 16 tons. They are arranged in circles, like ancient gathering places where people might have come together for ceremonies we can only imagine. The stones are shaped like giant letter T's, and many archaeologists believe they represent stylized human figures, silent centenards watching over rituals that took place 12,000 years ago. But it's the carvings that truly capture the imagination. Across the surfaces of these ancient pillars, skilled artists carved an entire menagerie of creatures. There are lions with flowing manes, their muscles rippling as if they might leap from the stone at any moment. Wild boars charge across the limestone, their tusks gleaming in the filtered light. Vultures spread their wings wide, as if preparing to take flight into the endless sky above. Serpents coil and twist, their scales rendered with such detail that you can almost feel their smooth, cool skin. These aren't random decorations. The animals seem to be arranged with purpose, telling stories or representing beliefs that connected these ancient people to the natural world around them. Some of the creatures depicted have long since vanished from this region, suggesting that the carvings preserve memories of a time when the climate was different, when this area was more lush and green, home to animals that no longer roam these hills. What makes Göbekli Tepe so remarkable isn't just its age, though that alone is staggering. This temple complex was built 12,000 years ago, making it older than Stonehenge by 7,000 years. It predates the pyramids of Egypt by 8,000 years. Most incredibly, it was built before the agricultural revolution, before humans learned to grow crops and domesticate animals, before the invention of pottery or the wheel or written language. According to everything we thought we knew about prehistoric humanity, the people who built Göbekli Tepe should have been small bands of hunter-gatherers, focused entirely on survival, with no time or energy for massive construction projects. Yet here stands proof that our ancestors were capable of organizing large groups of people, of planning and executing complex architectural projects, of creating art that still moves us today. The construction of Göbekli Tepe would have required hundreds of workers laboring for decades. They would have needed to quarry massive stones from limestone bedrock, transport them across difficult terrain, and then carve them with tools made of stone and bone. They would have needed a sophisticated understanding of engineering to raise these pillars and arrange them in perfect circles. Even more mysterious is what happened to Göbekli Tepe after it was built. Around 10,000 years ago, the entire complex was deliberately buried under tons of earth and debris. This wasn't natural erosion or the slow work of time. Someone made the conscious decision to cover these magnificent temples, to hide them from the world. The burial was so complete, so thorough, that the site remained hidden for 10,000 years until modern archaeologists began to uncover it. But Göbekli Tepe isn't alone. As archaeologists have continued to explore the region, they've discovered that it was part of a larger network of similar sites. Karahan Tepe, just 30 miles away, has revealed its own collection of carved pillars and circular enclosures. Navali Kori, now flooded beneath a modern dam, once held similar T-shaped pillars decorated with carved animals. These sites seem to be connected, part of a shared culture that flourished across southeastern Turkey and northern Syria during the dawn of human civilization. The implications are staggering. If these sites are connected, if they represent a coordinated effort by prehistoric communities, then we're looking at evidence of a sophisticated society that existed thousands of years before we thought such societies were possible. These weren't isolated tribes struggling to survive. They were organized communities capable of undertaking massive projects, of sharing artistic traditions across vast distances, of creating monuments that would endure for millennia. Some researchers have suggested that the building and burial of these sites might be connected to the Younger Dryas, a period of rapid climate change that occurred around 12,000 years ago. During this time, the Earth's climate shifted dramatically, bringing cold conditions and environmental upheaval. Perhaps the people who built these temples were responding to these changes, creating sacred spaces to appeal to the gods or commemorate a world that was disappearing. Perhaps they buried their temples when the crisis passed, or when new beliefs replaced the old ones. As we stand among these ancient stones, feeling the weight of 12,000 years of history, we can't help but wonder what other secrets lie buried beneath our feet. If hunter-gatherers could create temples this magnificent, if they could organize societies this complex, what else might they have accomplished? What other monuments might be waiting in the earth? What other stories might be carved in stone? What other mysteries might be hidden just below the surface of our understanding? The stones of Göbekli Tepe stand as silent witnesses to a chapter of human history that we're only beginning to read. They remind us that our ancestors were not the primitive cave dwellers we sometimes imagine, but people with dreams and visions, people who looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the cosmos, people who created beauty that still takes our breath away after 12,000 years. Walking among these ancient pillars as the sun sets behind the hills, casting long shadows across the carved animals, we begin to understand that we are not the first humans to gather in sacred spaces, to seek meaning in stone and symbol, to create something that will outlast our brief lives on this earth. The vultures carved into these pillars still watch over the site, their stone eyes reflecting the same stars that shone down on the original builders. The serpents still coil in their eternal dance, and the lions still prowl across the limestone, frozen in time but somehow still alive with the energy and intention of their creators. The mystery deepens when we consider the astronomical alignments that some researchers have detected in the arrangement of the pillars. The circular enclosures seem to be oriented toward specific stars and constellations, suggesting that the builders possessed sophisticated knowledge of the night sky. They may have been tracking the movements of celestial bodies, marking the passage of seasons, or recording astronomical events that held deep spiritual significance for their communities. There's something profoundly moving about standing where these ancient stargazers once stood, looking up at the same constellations they observed 12,000 years ago. The stars have shifted slightly in their positions over the millennia, but the patterns remain recognizable. Orion still hunts across the winter sky, the Great Bear still circles the northern pole, and the Pleiades still cluster together like a jeweled pendant hanging in the darkness. These ancient peoples saw the same celestial drama unfolding above them night after night, and they built their sacred spaces to honor and connect with this cosmic dance. The ritual practices that took place at Göbekli Tepe remain largely mysterious, but archaeologists have found evidence of feasting and ceremony. Large stone basins that might have held water or other liquids have been discovered, along with areas that seem designed for food preparation and communal meals. Perhaps the carved animals on the pillars represented totems or spiritual guides. Perhaps they told stories of creation or transformation. Perhaps they marked the boundaries between the world of the living and the realm of the sacred. Some of the most intriguing carvings show humans interacting with the animals, suggesting complex mythological narratives that we can only begin to interpret. There are scenes that might depict shamanic transformations, where humans take on the characteristics of powerful animals. There are abstract symbols that could represent astronomical phenomena, spiritual concepts, or territorial markers. Each carving is a puzzle piece in a vast jigsaw of ancient meaning that we're still trying to assemble. The tools used to create these masterpieces were surprisingly simple. Flint knives, stone hammers, and wooden levers would have been the primary implements available to the builders. Yet, with these basic tools, they achieved a level of artistic sophistication that rivals anything produced in later periods. The smooth curves of the animal forms, the precise angles of the T-shaped pillars, the intricate details of feathers and fur, all speak to a mastery of technique that could only have been developed over many generations of skilled craftsmanship. Perhaps that's the greatest mystery of Göbekli Tepe, not just how it was built or why it was buried, but how it makes us feel when we stand in its presence. There's something about these ancient stones that speaks to something deep within us, some recognition that we are part of a story much larger and older than we ever imagined. The people who built this place may be gone, but their vision lives on in every carved animal, every perfectly placed pillar, every circle of stone that still holds the echo of gatherings that took place when the world was young. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe around 10,000 years ago adds another layer to the mystery. Who made this decision, and why? Was it a response to changing religious beliefs, to environmental pressures, to social upheaval? The careful way the site was covered suggests it wasn't an act of destruction but of preservation, as if the builders wanted to protect their sacred spaces for future generations to discover. In a way, their plan worked perfectly. The burial kept the site safe for 10,000 years, until the time was right for us to uncover it and begin to understand its significance. If hunter-gatherers built temples before cities, if they organized complex societies before agriculture, if they created art before writing, then what else have we misunderstood about the people we call primitive? What other wonders might be waiting beneath the earth? What other voices from the deep past might be ready to tell us their stories if only we know how to listen? The answer to that question may lie thousands of miles away on another continent, beneath another mysterious hill that has been hiding its secrets for even longer than Göbekli Tepe. Far from the windswept hills of Turkey, on the lush island of Java in Indonesia, another mystery rises from the earth like a green giant sleeping beneath a blanket of tropical forest. Mount Padang doesn't look like much at first glance. Covered in dense vegetation and crowned with what appears to be a natural arrangement of volcanic rocks, it seems like just another hill in a landscape full of volcanic peaks. But appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the most profound secrets hide in plain sight. Local people have known about Mount Padang for generations, calling it Gunung Padang, which simply means mountain of light or mountain of enlightenment. For centuries, it was considered a sacred place, somewhere to come for meditation and spiritual reflection. The terraced slopes seemed perfect for contemplation, with ancient stones arranged in patterns that felt somehow intentional, somehow meaningful. But no one suspected that beneath their feet lay what might be one of the oldest and most complex structures ever built by human hands. The first hint that Mount Padang was more than it appeared came in 1998, when Indonesian archaeologists began studying the stone arrangements on its surface. What they found was intriguing, but not earth-shattering. The visible stones seemed to form a megalithic site, with large basalt columns arranged in terraces that followed the natural contours of the hill. Carbon dating of organic material found between the stones suggested the site was around 3,000 to 4,000 years old, making it ancient but not unprecedented. For years, that's where the story rested. Mount Padang was catalogued as another interesting archaeological site in a region rich with ancient monuments and temples. But some researchers weren't satisfied with this surface-level understanding. They looked at the precise arrangement of the massive stones, each one weighing several tons, and wondered how such heavy blocks had been transported to the top of a hill and arranged with such obvious care and intention. They noticed that the columns seemed to be arranged in patterns that might have astronomical significance, aligned with the rising and setting of certain stars. In 2010, a team of Indonesian geologists and archaeologists decided to look deeper, literally. Using ground-penetrating radar, seismic surveys, and core drilling, they began to probe beneath the visible surface of Mount Padang. What they discovered was stunning. The hill wasn't just a natural formation with some ancient stones arranged on top. It was a massive artificial structure built in multiple layers over thousands of years, each layer representing a different phase of construction and different period of human activity. The radar revealed chambers and tunnels deep within the hill, empty spaces that suggested rooms or passages built with incredible precision. The seismic surveys showed that the entire structure was far more organized than anyone had imagined, with what appeared to be walls, foundations, and architectural features extending deep into the earth. Core samples brought up fragments of worked stone, pieces of concrete-like material, and evidence of human construction at depths that corresponded to ages far older than the surface remains. The most controversial findings emerged from the deepest levels of the structure. As the drilling went deeper and the dating went further back in time, the researchers began to encounter evidence of construction that seemed impossibly old. Some of the deepest layers appeared to date back 10,000 years, then 15,000 years, then 20,000 years or more. If these dates were accurate, Mount Padang would be not just the oldest pyramid in the world, but the oldest large-scale human construction project ever discovered. The implications were staggering. 20,000 years ago, according to conventional archaeology, humans had barely begun to experiment with agriculture. They were supposed to be nomadic hunter-gatherers, living in small groups and focusing entirely on survival. The idea that they could have organized the massive labor force needed to build a stepped pyramid covering several acres seemed impossible. Yet the evidence kept pointing in that direction. In 2023, the research team published a paper declaring Mount Padang to be the oldest pyramid in the world, older than the pyramids of Egypt by 15,000 years, older than Göbekli Tepe by 8,000 years. The announcement sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Critics questioned the dating methods, the interpretation of the radar data, and the conclusions drawn from the core samples. The debate became so heated that the journal eventually retracted the paper, citing methodological concerns and the need for more rigorous peer review. But retracting a paper doesn't make the physical evidence disappear. The radar scans still show those mysterious chambers deep within the hill. The core samples still contain fragments of worked stone from layers that conventional archaeology says should contain nothing but natural sediment. The precise arrangement of the massive surface stones still defies easy explanation using only the tools and techniques that were supposedly available to ancient peoples. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between the most conservative and most radical interpretations. Perhaps Mount Padang is indeed artificial, but built over a much longer period than originally thought. Perhaps it began as a natural hill that was gradually modified and enhanced by successive generations of inhabitants, each one adding their own layer to the structure. Perhaps the deepest layers represent not massive construction projects but smaller-scale modifications that accumulated over thousands of years. What's undeniable is that Mount Padang represents something extraordinary. Even if we accept the most conservative dating, we're still looking at a sophisticated megalithic site that required enormous amounts of planning and labor to create. The basalt columns that form the terraces had to be quarried from volcanic rock, shaped with precision, and transported to the hilltop using only human power. The arrangement of the stones shows clear evidence of astronomical knowledge and architectural sophistication. Standing on the terraces of Mount Padang as the sun sets over the Indonesian archipelago, watching the light play across the ancient stones while tropical birds call from the surrounding forest, it's easy to feel the weight of mystery that surrounds this place. Whether it's 4,000 years old or 20,000 years old, whether it was built in a single massive effort or accumulated over millennia, it represents a level of human achievement that challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of our ancestors. The controversy surrounding Mount Padang highlights one of the central tensions in archaeology today. How do we balance scientific skepticism with openness to new discoveries? How do we maintain rigorous standards while remaining willing to revise our understanding when the evidence demands it? The dating methods used at Mount Padang may need refinement, the interpretations may need adjustment, but the fundamental question remains. If this hill is artificial, if it really does contain chambers and passages built by human hands, then we need to expand our understanding of what ancient peoples were capable of achieving. The stones of Mount Padang keep their secrets well, wrapped in layers of earth and time and scholarly debate. But they also keep their promise, the promise that somewhere beneath our feet, somewhere just beyond the reach of our current understanding, lie truths about human history that are stranger and more wonderful than we have yet dared to imagine. The mountain that shouldn't exist continues to exist, continues to challenge us, continues to suggest that the story of human civilization may be far older and far more complex than we ever thought possible. When you walk the terraces of Mount Padang in the early morning, when mist still clings to the volcanic stones and the air is cool with the promise of dawn, you can almost sense the presence of those ancient builders. Were they the same people who left traces in other parts of Indonesia, the mysterious creators of stone monuments scattered across thousands of islands? Were they connected to the builders of Göbekli Tepe, separated by thousands of miles but united by some shared vision of what humans could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal? The precision of the stonework suggests a level of planning and skill that goes far beyond what we might expect from people working with primitive tools. Each basalt column had to be carefully selected, shaped, and positioned. The weight of these stones, some measuring over 10 feet in length and weighing several tons each, would have required sophisticated understanding of leverage, transportation, and construction techniques. Moving such massive blocks up the slopes of a hill, then arranging them in perfect terraces that have remained stable for thousands of years, represents an engineering achievement that would be impressive even by modern standards. The astronomical alignments discovered at Mount Padang add another layer of mystery to the site. Some researchers have identified orientations that correspond to the rising and setting positions of important stars and constellations as they would have appeared in the ancient sky. These alignments suggest that the builders possessed detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics, that they were tracking the movements of heavenly bodies and incorporating this information into their architectural plans. Such knowledge would have required generations of careful observation, recording, and transmission of astronomical data. Perhaps most intriguingly, some of the chambers detected deep within the hill appear to be designed with acoustic properties in mind. When researchers have been able to access these spaces, either through natural openings or carefully planned excavations, they've discovered that sounds behave in unusual ways within the stone chambers. Voices are amplified and transformed, creating resonances and echoes that might have been used for ceremonial or religious purposes. The builders may have understood principles of acoustics that we're only beginning to appreciate today. The botanical evidence surrounding Mount Padang also tells a fascinating story. Analysis of ancient pollen and plant remains suggests that the climate and vegetation of the region have changed dramatically over the millennia. When the deeper layers of the structure were being built, the area may have been quite different from today's tropical paradise. There are traces of plants and trees that no longer grow in the region, suggesting connections to different climate zones or evidence of environmental changes that occurred over thousands of years. The cultural implications of Mount Padang extend far beyond Indonesia. If the site really is as old as some researchers believe, it would represent evidence of sophisticated civilization in Southeast Asia at a time when most of the world was supposedly populated only by small bands of hunter-gatherers. This would suggest that the development of complex societies wasn't limited to the fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia and Egypt, but was happening simultaneously in widely separated parts of the world. Perhaps the emergence of civilization wasn't a single event that spread from one location, but a natural tendency of human communities that arose independently in many different places. The controversy surrounding the site has led to new and more sophisticated approaches to archaeological dating and analysis. Researchers are developing better methods for dating stone constructions, for interpreting ground-penetrating radar data, and for understanding how ancient sites change over long periods of time. Whether or not Mount Padang turns out to be as old as its most enthusiastic supporters claim, the research being conducted there is advancing our ability to study other mysterious sites around the world. The retraction of the 2023 paper, while disappointing to some researchers, actually demonstrates the strength of the scientific process. Good science requires that extraordinary claims be supported by extraordinary evidence, and the archaeological community takes this responsibility seriously. The fact that controversial findings are subjected to rigorous scrutiny doesn't mean that new discoveries are being suppressed, but rather that they must meet the highest standards of evidence and interpretation. Yet even as the scientific debate continues, Mount Padang itself remains unchanged, a green hill covered with ancient stones that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless generations. The chambers and passages detected deep within the structure continue to hold their secrets, waiting for new technologies and new approaches that might finally unlock their mysteries. The precise terraces continue to align with celestial events, just as they did when they were first constructed, connecting earth and sky in patterns that speak to some fundamental human need to understand our place in the cosmos. As we stand among these ancient stones, feeling the tropical breeze carry the scents of frangipani and jasmine, listening to the calls of exotic birds hidden in the canopy above, we're reminded that mystery and wonder are not things of the past, but living realities that surround us still. Every stone in these terraces represents hours of human labor. Every alignment speaks to careful observation and planning. Every chamber holds the potential for new understanding about our ancestors and ourselves. If deeper layers hold deeper truths, if the most ancient foundations of Mount Padang really do stretch back 20,000 years or more, then we are looking at evidence that human creativity, ingenuity, and spiritual longing have been constant companions throughout our entire history as a species. The mountain that shouldn't exist reminds us that the impossible has always been merely the not yet understood, and that beneath the surface of everything we think we know about the past, extraordinary discoveries are waiting for those brave enough to dig deeper. Close your eyes and imagine the world as it was 20,000 years ago, when vast sheets of ice covered much of North America and Europe, locking away so much water that the oceans stood 400 feet lower than they do today. Coastlines stretched far beyond their current boundaries, revealing vast plains where fish now swim and coral reefs now grow. Where today we see only endless blue water, our ancestors walked on dry land, built their homes, raised their children, and created the earliest chapters of human civilization. This lost world wasn't empty wilderness. Archaeological evidence suggests that many of the most important early settlements were built along these ancient coastlines, taking advantage of the rich resources where land met sea. Rivers that now disappear beneath the waves once flowed through valleys that supported thriving communities. Islands that are now mere dots on the map were once mountain peaks rising from expansive coastal plains dotted with villages and towns. Then, as the ice began to melt around 15,000 years ago, the seas began their relentless rise. It wasn't a sudden catastrophe like the tsunamis that occasionally devastate modern coastlines, but rather a gradual drowning that unfolded over thousands of years. Generation after generation watched as the waters crept higher, swallowing beaches, flooding river mouths, turning hills into islands, and eventually submerging them completely. By the time the ice sheets had finished melting around 6,000 years ago, more than 120 meters of coastline had vanished beneath the waves, taking with it countless settlements and perhaps entire civilizations. Today, less than 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped in detail, and an even smaller fraction has been explored by human eyes or underwater vehicles. This means that the vast majority of these drowned landscapes remain completely unknown to us, their secrets preserved in the cold, dark depths where time moves differently and the past lies waiting in perfect, silent suspension. But in the few places where underwater archaeologists have been able to search systematically, they've made discoveries that hint at the magnitude of what we've lost. Off the coast of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea lies Atlit Yam, a Neolithic village that was submerged around 9,000 years ago. The site is remarkably well preserved, with stone houses, hearths, and even wooden artifacts still intact after millennia underwater. Most intriguingly, the site contains a stone circle made of 7 megaliths, each weighing up to 600 kilograms, arranged around a freshwater spring that still bubbles up from the seafloor. The preservation at Atlit Yam is so complete that archaeologists have been able to study the daily life of its inhabitants in extraordinary detail. They've found evidence of wheat and barley cultivation, animal domestication, and sophisticated tool-making. The villagers were skilled fishermen and farmers who lived in well-built stone houses and participated in complex trade networks that brought them materials from hundreds of kilometers away. When rising seas finally forced them to abandon their homes, they left behind a snapshot of early agricultural society frozen in time. Even more mysterious are the ruins found off the western coast of India near the modern city of Dwarka. Local tradition has long held that this area was the site of an ancient city, the legendary capital of Lord Krishna, described in Sanskrit texts as a magnificent metropolis with palaces, gardens, and harbors. For centuries, these stories were dismissed as mythology, beautiful tales with no basis in historical reality. But underwater surveys conducted in recent decades have revealed extensive stone structures on the seabed, including what appear to be walls, foundations, and even carved stones that match descriptions found in ancient texts. The structures at Dwarka are built from massive blocks of sandstone, some weighing several tons, arranged in patterns that suggest careful planning and sophisticated engineering. Carbon dating of organic material found at the site has yielded dates ranging from 3,000 to over 9,000 years old, suggesting that the area was occupied for millennia before being submerged. While debates continue about the exact nature and age of these underwater ruins, their existence demonstrates that the boundary between myth and history is often more fluid than we might expect. In the Aegean Sea, off the coast of southern Greece, lies Pavlopetri, often called the world's oldest submerged city. Dating to around 5,000 years ago, this Bronze Age settlement covers an area of nearly 30,000 square meters and includes houses, courtyards, streets, and even what appears to be a complex system of water management. The city was clearly planned, with straight streets intersecting at right angles and buildings arranged in organized blocks. This level of urban planning was once thought to be a much later development in human civilization. What makes Pavlopetri particularly fascinating is its completeness. Unlike most archaeological sites on land, where centuries of human activity have disturbed and altered the original structures, this underwater city remains exactly as it was when the rising seas claimed it. Walking through the submerged streets in diving gear, archaeologists can see the layout of the ancient settlement with a clarity that's almost never possible at terrestrial sites. They can trace the daily paths of the inhabitants, identify different districts within the city, and understand how the community organized itself both socially and spatially. Perhaps the most controversial underwater discovery lies off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni. Here, divers have found massive stone formations that descend in terraces toward the ocean floor, creating what looks like a giant underwater staircase or pyramid. The structures feature straight edges, right angles, and flat surfaces that seem almost too precise to be natural. Some researchers argue that these formations are the remains of a lost civilization, possibly dating back over 10,000 years, while others maintain that they are simply unusual geological formations carved by natural processes. The debate over Yonaguni highlights one of the central challenges in underwater archaeology. When we find mysterious structures on land, we can examine them closely, take detailed measurements, and conduct extensive analysis to determine their origin. But underwater, access is limited, visibility is often poor, and the techniques available for study are much more restricted. It can be incredibly difficult to distinguish between natural rock formations and human-constructed monuments, especially when both have been shaped by thousands of years of water erosion. What's certain is that Yonaguni, like the other underwater sites, reminds us of how much we don't know about our past. If these terraces are natural, they represent a remarkable example of how geological processes can create structures that seem almost architectural in their precision. If they are artificial, they suggest that sophisticated stoneworking techniques were being practiced in this part of the world much earlier than previously thought. The implications of these underwater discoveries extend far beyond archaeology. They remind us that our perspective on human history is shaped by the accidents of preservation and discovery. We know about the pyramids of Egypt because they were built in a desert where stone structures can survive for millennia. We know about the temples of Greece because they were constructed from durable marble in a relatively stable environment. But how many equally impressive monuments were built in less permanent materials or in locations that are now beneath the waves? Climate change continues to affect sea levels today, and many coastal archaeological sites are under threat from rising waters. Islands in the Pacific are losing land to erosion and inundation, potentially taking with them evidence of some of the earliest human migrations across the ocean. Coastal settlements around the world are being forced to adapt to higher tides and more frequent flooding, just as their ancestors did when the Ice Age ended and the Great Melt began. As we develop better technology for underwater exploration, from sophisticated sonar systems to remotely operated vehicles to advanced diving equipment, we're beginning to get our first real glimpses of this drowned world. Each new discovery raises as many questions as it answers. How many coastal civilizations developed sophisticated technologies that we've never recognized because their workshops and laboratories are now under hundreds of feet of water? How many trade networks connected distant shores that are now separated by vast expanses of ocean? How many artistic and cultural achievements lie buried beneath marine sediments, waiting for someone to disturb their ancient sleep? The cities lost to the sea represent more than just archaeological curiosities. They are reminders of the impermanence of all human achievement, but also of the remarkable resilience and adaptability that has allowed our species to survive and thrive through dramatic environmental changes. The people who lived in these drowned settlements faced challenges very similar to those we face today, as rising seas and changing climates force communities to make difficult decisions about where and how to live. Most civilizations rise by the water, drawn by the resources and opportunities that coastal environments provide. Rivers offer transportation and fertile soil for agriculture. Seas provide fish, salt, and connections to distant lands and peoples. It's natural that many of our earliest and most important settlements would have been built where land meets water, but this same attraction to coastal locations means that much of our earliest history now lies beneath the waves, preserved in the deep but largely inaccessible to our curious eyes and questioning minds. So how many of them were swallowed by it before we ever knew they were there? The answer may be more than we can imagine, a vast underwater museum of human achievement that we're only beginning to explore and understand. There is something almost magical about standing next to a stone that weighs 800 tons, knowing that human beings moved it from a quarry miles away using nothing but rope, wood, and an understanding of physics that we're still trying to comprehend. In the ruins of Baalbek, Lebanon, these impossible stones rest where ancient builders placed them over 2,000 years ago, fitted so precisely into massive walls that you cannot slip a knife blade between the joints. Each block is larger than a modern city bus, heavier than the largest stones used in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, yet they were lifted, transported, and positioned with an accuracy that would challenge even today's most sophisticated construction equipment. The Romans called this place Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and they built some of their most magnificent temples here. But the foundations they built upon were already ancient when Roman engineers arrived, already mysterious, already impossible to fully understand. The massive stones that form the base of the Temple of Jupiter are not Roman work. They belong to an earlier time, an earlier people, an earlier understanding of what could be accomplished when human ingenuity met seemingly insurmountable challenges. These foundation stones, known as the trilithon, consist of 3 limestone blocks that each measure roughly 64 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. They fit together so perfectly that the joints between them are nearly invisible, creating a wall that has stood firm through earthquakes, wars, and the passage of millennia. But perhaps even more mysterious is the stone that never made it to the temple, the one that still lies in the quarry nearly a mile away, partially carved but never moved. This unfinished megalith weighs an estimated 1,200 tons, making it one of the largest worked stones in the world. How do you move a stone that weighs 1,200 tons? Modern cranes capable of lifting such weights didn't exist until the 20th century, and even today, transporting such a massive object over rough terrain would be an enormous engineering challenge. Yet somehow, ancient builders not only planned to move this colossal block, but actually succeeded in moving others nearly as large. The precision of the carving, the smoothness of the surfaces, the perfect right angles and straight edges, all speak to a level of technical mastery that seems almost impossible, given the tools that were supposedly available. Halfway around the world, high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, another impossible stone construction defies easy explanation. The walls of Sacsayhuaman, overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, are built from massive blocks of granite and limestone fitted together in complex polygonal patterns. Some of these stones weigh over 100 tons, and they have been cut and shaped with such precision that the joints between them are tighter than those achieved by most modern stonework. What makes Sacsayhuaman even more remarkable is the irregular, puzzle-like way the stones fit together. Each block has been individually shaped to match its neighbors exactly, creating interlocking patterns that distribute weight and stress in ways that make the walls incredibly resistant to earthquakes. The Andes are one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, yet these walls have survived countless tremors that have leveled more recent constructions. The engineering principles behind this earthquake-resistant design are only now being understood and appreciated by modern architects. The precision of the stonework at Sacsayhuaman goes beyond what seems necessary for structural stability. The surfaces of the stones are so smooth and flat that they seem almost polished, with curves and angles that flow together like pieces of a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Some blocks have as many as 12 sides, each one precisely angled to fit perfectly with its neighbors. The amount of planning, measuring, and careful carving required to achieve such precision boggles the mind, especially when we consider that each stone had to be quarried from locations miles away and somehow transported up steep mountain slopes to the construction site. Even more puzzling are the ruins at Puma Punku, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex in Bolivia. Here, ancient builders created what may be the most precisely cut stones ever found in the ancient world. The blocks are made from andesite and red sandstone, materials that are extremely hard and difficult to work with primitive tools. Yet the surfaces of these stones are so flat and smooth that they seem machine-made, with edges that are straight to within fractions of an inch and corners that form perfect right angles. The blocks at Puma Punku are not just precisely cut, they're also designed to fit together in complex interlocking patterns. Many feature sophisticated joints, channels, and connecting elements that allow them to be assembled without mortar into structures of remarkable stability and precision. The level of standardization is extraordinary, with identical elements that could be mass-produced and interchanged, suggesting a level of planning and quality control that we associate with modern manufacturing rather than ancient construction. What tools could have been used to achieve such precision? The hardness of andesite makes it extremely difficult to work with copper or bronze implements, the most advanced metal tools supposedly available to ancient South American peoples. Stone tools would have required enormous amounts of time and effort to shape such hard materials, yet the surfaces show no signs of the rough marks that would be left by traditional stone carving techniques. Some researchers have suggested that the builders must have had access to more advanced tools, perhaps made from materials that don't preserve well in the archaeological record, or techniques that we haven't yet rediscovered. The transportation challenges at these sites are as puzzling as the precision of the stonework. The quarries for Puma Punku are located across Lake Titicaca, meaning that 100-ton blocks somehow had to be moved across water and then transported up steep slopes to the construction site, which sits at over 12,000 feet above sea level. The thin air at this altitude makes physical labor much more difficult, yet somehow ancient builders managed to move massive stones and fit them together with incredible precision in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. Similar mysteries appear at megalithic sites around the world. At Stonehenge in England, the massive trilithons were erected using stones that had to be transported from quarries over 150 miles away. Some of the smaller blue stones came from even further, from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 200 miles that would have required crossing rivers, mountains, and possibly even stretches of ocean. The effort involved in transporting these stones speaks to the enormous importance the builders placed on using specific materials from specific locations. In Easter Island, hundreds of massive stone statues called moai were carved from volcanic rock and somehow transported across the island to their final locations. Recent experiments have shown that the statues could have been moved by rocking them back and forth while standing upright, but this technique would have required incredible skill and coordination to move multi-ton sculptures across miles of rough terrain without damaging them. The common thread connecting all these sites is not just the massive size of the stones or the precision of the construction, but the obvious evidence of careful planning and sophisticated understanding of engineering principles. These weren't random acts of stone moving, but carefully conceived projects that required knowledge of mathematics, physics, and structural engineering. The builders understood concepts like load distribution, seismic resistance, and thermal expansion that we think of as modern discoveries. What's perhaps most remarkable is that these techniques appear to have been developed independently in widely separated parts of the world. The builders of Baalbek had no contact with the creators of Sacsayhuaman, yet both achieved similar levels of precision, using similar approaches to fitting massive stones together. This suggests that the principles underlying megalithic construction were discovered and rediscovered by different cultures, each one developing their own solutions to the universal challenge of how to build something that will last forever. The tools and techniques used at these sites remain largely mysterious. We can see the results of ancient engineering, but we can only guess at the methods used to achieve them. Some researchers have suggested that the builders possessed knowledge that has been lost to us, techniques for cutting and moving stone that were more advanced than the simple tools found in archaeological contexts would suggest. Others argue that we simply underestimate what can be accomplished with patience, skill, and large numbers of motivated workers using traditional methods. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between these extremes. The builders of these magnificent structures were clearly master engineers who understood principles of construction that took modern civilization centuries to rediscover. They were also evidently skilled organizers who could coordinate the efforts of hundreds or thousands of workers over periods of years or decades. Most importantly, they were people with vision, people who looked at massive stones and saw not obstacles but opportunities, people who believed that human ingenuity could overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it might seem. The impossible stones of Baalbek, Sacsayhuaman, and Pumapunku stand as monuments to human ambition and capability. They remind us that precision is not proof of alien intervention, but rather proof of minds that saw the world in ways we're still learning to understand and appreciate. These ancient engineers looked at the raw materials of the earth and saw possibilities that continue to inspire and challenge us thousands of years later, creating works of such beauty and permanence that they seem to bridge the gap between human achievement and the eternal strength of stone itself. Imagine if every book in every library on Earth was printed on paper that dissolved in water, faded in sunlight, and crumbled at the touch of air. Imagine if every photograph, every document, every record of human achievement was written in disappearing ink that lasted only a few hundred years before vanishing completely. This is the reality of the archaeological record, where the vast majority of everything our ancestors ever created has long since returned to dust, leaving us with only the tiniest fragments of their lives and achievements. We live in an age of permanence, surrounded by materials designed to last. Our buildings are made of steel and concrete that can stand for centuries. Our information is stored on digital media that can be copied endlessly without degradation. Our photographs are printed on papers treated with chemicals that resist fading and decay. But for most of human history, people built with wood, stored information in their memories, and created art from materials that time would inevitably reclaim. Think about the homes where our ancestors lived. For countless generations, humans built their shelters from wood, mud, and thatch, materials that were abundant, workable, and perfectly suited to their needs. These houses could be warm and comfortable, spacious and beautiful, but they were also temporary by nature. Wood rots, mud erodes, and thatch decays. Within a few decades of abandonment, most structures built from organic materials leave little more than post holes and foundation stones to mark their former existence. The same is true for the tools that filled these vanished homes. Wooden handles decay, leaving only metal blades and stone heads. Leather clothing and fabric textiles decompose, leaving only bone buttons and metal fasteners. Baskets, bowls, furniture, musical instruments, toys, games, all the objects that would have filled ancient homes and made them livable, comfortable places disappear almost completely from the archaeological record. We're left with the impression that our ancestors lived sparse, uncomfortable lives, when in reality, they may have been surrounded by sophisticated crafts and beautiful objects that simply haven't survived the passage of time. The knowledge that guided ancient peoples was even more fragile than their possessions. For most of human history, information was stored in human memory and passed down through oral tradition. Master craftsmen taught their apprentices through demonstration and practice. Storytellers preserved history, mythology, and practical knowledge through songs and tales that could be remembered and repeated. Priests and shamans maintained religious and astronomical knowledge through rituals and ceremonies that encoded complex information in memorable forms. This oral knowledge was incredibly sophisticated and surprisingly durable, capable of preserving detailed information across thousands of years and hundreds of generations. Australian Aboriginal peoples have maintained oral traditions that include accurate descriptions of geological events that occurred over 10,000 years ago. Native American tribes have preserved detailed knowledge of astronomical cycles, medicinal plants, and historical events through storytelling traditions that predate any written records. These oral libraries contained vast amounts of practical and theoretical knowledge that rivaled anything preserved in written form. But oral traditions are also incredibly vulnerable. A single plague, war, or natural disaster that kills the knowledge keepers can wipe out thousands of years of accumulated wisdom in a matter of days. The arrival of new religions or political systems can interrupt the transmission of traditional knowledge, leaving entire bodies of understanding to fade away within a single generation. Languages themselves can disappear, taking with them all the concepts, techniques, and insights that were embedded in their specialized vocabularies. The environments where our ancestors lived have also worked against the preservation of evidence. Tropical regions where many early human societies flourished are particularly hostile to archaeological preservation. The heat and humidity cause rapid decay of organic materials. The acidic soils dissolve bones and shells. The abundant plant life quickly covers abandoned sites, and the aggressive root systems of jungle vegetation can break apart even stone structures within a few centuries. Rivers change their courses, burying some sites under layers of sediment while washing others completely away. Coastal erosion claims settlements that were built too close to the water's edge. Volcanic eruptions can preserve sites like Pompeii in remarkable detail, but they can also destroy vast areas, obliterating all traces of human habitation. Earthquakes topple buildings and fracture the ground, making it difficult to understand the original layout and function of ancient structures. Even in relatively stable environments, the slow processes of erosion and weathering gradually erase the evidence of human activity. Wind-blown sand fills in excavations and covers foundations. Frost action splits stones and destroys carefully fitted joints. Chemical weathering dissolves limestone and marble, erasing carved inscriptions and decorative details. The archaeological record is not a complete library of human history, but rather a collection of random pages that happened to survive the destructive forces of time and nature. The metals that do survive often tell misleading stories about ancient technological capabilities. Bronze and iron corrode and rust away, leaving only the most durable alloys or items that happened to be buried in just the right conditions. We may be missing evidence of sophisticated metallurgy because the products of that knowledge have long since oxidized away. Similarly, we may underestimate ancient understanding of chemistry, medicine, and agriculture because the evidence for these sciences was preserved primarily in perishable materials and oral traditions. Climate change has always been a factor in determining what survives and what disappears. During periods of global warming, melting glaciers and rising sea levels can flood and destroy coastal sites. During ice ages, advancing glaciers can scrape away all surface evidence of human activity, while retreating ice can expose sites that were buried for millennia. Desert expansion can bury civilizations under sand dunes, while returning moisture can cause rapid decay of previously preserved materials. The animals and plants that shared the landscape with our ancestors also affected the preservation of evidence. Burrowing animals disturb archaeological layers, mixing materials from different time periods and making it difficult to understand the original context of artifacts. Termites and other insects can consume wooden structures and organic artifacts with remarkable efficiency. Large herbivores can trample sites and scatter artifacts over wide areas. Even microorganisms play a role, breaking down organic materials at the molecular level and returning them to the soil. Human activities throughout history have also contributed to the destruction of archaeological evidence. Later, peoples often reused building stones from earlier structures, recycling ancient monuments into new constructions. Lime burning, the process of heating limestone to create cement, has destroyed countless ancient buildings and sculptures. Farming activities plow up and scatter surface artifacts, while modern construction projects often proceed with little or no archaeological oversight, bulldozing ancient sites before they can be properly studied. War has always been particularly destructive to the historical record. Conquering armies burn libraries, destroy monuments, and scatter populations that might have preserved traditional knowledge. The systematic destruction of cultural artifacts has been used as a weapon throughout history, aimed at erasing the identity and achievements of defeated peoples. Recent conflicts in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan have provided tragic reminders of how quickly millennia of human heritage can be destroyed by deliberate acts of vandalism and neglect. The result of all these destructive forces is that the archaeological record represents only a tiny fraction of everything our ancestors ever created or achieved. We may be seeing less than 1% of the artifacts that were originally produced, and even less of the knowledge and traditions that guided ancient societies. The monuments and artifacts that do survive are not necessarily representative of typical ancient life, but rather the exceptional items that happen to be made from durable materials and stored in favorable conditions. This selective preservation creates a distorted picture of the past. We know much more about the activities of elites who could afford to build in stone and metal than about the lives of common people who lived in wooden houses and used tools made from organic materials. We know more about religious and ceremonial activities, which often took place in permanent structures, than about daily life and work, which left fewer traces in the archaeological record. We know more about the final stages of ancient civilizations when they had developed writing and monumental architecture than about their earlier developmental phases when they may have been just as sophisticated but worked primarily in perishable materials. Perhaps most importantly, the vanishing record means that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found traces of advanced technology or sophisticated knowledge at ancient sites doesn't mean these things didn't exist. It may simply mean that the evidence for them was made from materials that couldn't survive the passage of time, or that it's buried in places we haven't yet learned to look. The realization that we're seeing only the most stubborn survivors of ancient human achievement should make us humble about our understanding of the past and excited about the potential for future discoveries. Every new site that's excavated, every new dating technique that's developed, every new approach to analyzing ancient materials has the potential to reveal capabilities and achievements that we never suspected our ancestors possessed. We think we know our past, but we may only be seeing its most persistent remnants. The tip of an iceberg whose vast bulk remains hidden beneath the waves of time. The true scope of human achievement throughout history may be far greater, far more diverse, and far more remarkable than the fragmentary evidence that has survived to tell us their stories. There is something haunting about the way ancient peoples from around the world, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, all tell remarkably similar stories. Stories of a great flood that covered the earth. Stories of advanced civilizations that vanished beneath the waves. Stories of a golden age when gods walked among humans and knowledge flowed like water. We call these stories myths, relegating them to the realm of imagination and folklore, but what if they're something more? What if they're the last echoes of real events, preserved not in stone tablets or written records, but in the collective memory of our species? The flood stories are perhaps the most universal of all human myths. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim, who survived a world-destroying deluge by building a great ark. The Hebrew Bible speaks of Noah and his floating sanctuary that preserved life through 40 days and nights of rain. Hindu scriptures describe Manu, who was warned by the god Vishnu to build a boat before the waters rose to swallow the world. Greek mythology tells of Deucalion and Pyrrha, the sole survivors of a flood sent by Zeus to cleanse the earth of human wickedness. These stories appear not just in the civilizations we know well, but in cultures across every inhabited continent. Native American tribes from the Pacific Northwest to the Great Plains have flood traditions. Australian Aboriginal peoples speak of rising waters that transform the landscape. African cultures preserve tales of great deluges that reshaped the world. South American peoples tell of floods that forced their ancestors to seek refuge in high places, waiting for the waters to recede and the world to be reborn. For centuries, scholars dismissed these widespread flood myths as either borrowings from Near Eastern sources or natural products of the human imagination. But as our understanding of Earth's climate history has improved, a different possibility has emerged. The end of the last ice age between 15,000 and 10,000 years ago was marked by dramatic changes in sea level and climate that would have profoundly affected human populations around the world. As the great ice sheets melted, ocean levels rose by more than 100 meters, flooding vast areas of coastal plain that had been home to human communities for thousands of years. This wasn't a single catastrophic event, but rather a series of rising waters that unfolded over millennia. However, some episodes of melting were more rapid than others, and there's evidence for several periods when sea levels rose quickly enough to flood large areas within the span of a human lifetime. The most dramatic of these events may have been the catastrophic draining of glacial Lake Agassiz around 8,000 years ago. This enormous body of water, larger than all the Great Lakes combined, had been held back by ice dams in what is now central Canada. When the dams finally failed, the lake emptied into the North Atlantic in a matter of months, raising global sea levels by several meters and potentially triggering rapid climate changes around the world. Could memories of such events have been preserved in human oral traditions for thousands of years? Recent research suggests that the answer may be yes. Indigenous Australian stories about the flooding of coastal areas have been shown to contain accurate geographical information about landscapes that were submerged over 7,000 years ago. These oral traditions describe specific locations, landmarks, and even the sequence of flooding events in ways that match what geological evidence tells us about post-glacial sea level rise. The precision of these oral memories is remarkable. Aboriginal stories from different parts of Australia describe the gradual submersion of land bridges, the transformation of hills into islands, and the flooding of river valleys in ways that correspond closely to what scientists have reconstructed about the changing coastlines of the continent. The stories even preserve details about where freshwater springs could be found on the newly submerged seafloor, information that has proven useful to modern researchers studying underwater archaeology. If Australian Aboriginal peoples could preserve accurate memories of geological events for 7,000 years, what other historical information might be encoded in the myths and legends of ancient cultures? The flood stories that appear around the world may be distorted and mythologized, but they might also preserve genuine memories of the dramatic environmental changes that marked the end of the Ice Age. The story of Atlantis, first recorded by the Greek philosopher Plato around 2,400 years ago, has fascinated and puzzled people for centuries. Plato described an advanced island civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time, a sophisticated society with impressive architecture, advanced technology, and a powerful navy. According to his account, Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night of earthquakes and floods, sinking beneath the ocean and disappearing forever. Most scholars have treated Atlantis as a philosophical allegory rather than a historical account, a story that Plato invented to illustrate his ideas about ideal societies and their potential for corruption. But some researchers have wondered whether the tale might preserve memories of a real catastrophe, perhaps the explosive eruption of the volcano on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, that occurred around 3,600 years ago. The Thera eruption was one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history, many times more powerful than the explosion of Krakatoa in 1883. The eruption destroyed the Minoan settlement on the island, generated massive tsunamis that devastated coastlines throughout the eastern Mediterranean, and may have contributed to the decline of the advanced Minoan civilization on Crete. The parallels with Plato's description of Atlantis are striking. An advanced island society destroyed by natural catastrophe and swallowed by the sea. Egyptian records speak of Zep Tepi the first time, a golden age when the gods ruled directly over Egypt and humanity possessed wisdom and capabilities that were later lost. According to these traditions, the first time ended with a great catastrophe that scattered the gods and forced humanity to rebuild civilization from scattered remnants of ancient knowledge. The priests who preserved these stories claimed they were based on records stretching back tens of thousands of years, far beyond the conventional timeline of Egyptian civilization. These Egyptian traditions describe a time when the Nile flowed differently, when the climate was different, when the stars followed different patterns in the sky. Some of these details correspond to what we know about the Egyptian landscape during the early Holocene, when the Sahara was green and the Nile carried much more water than it does today. Could the priests have been preserving genuine memories of a much earlier period in Egyptian history, a time when the civilization was more advanced than we currently believe possible? The Younger Dryas period, which lasted from roughly 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represents one of the most dramatic climate events in recent Earth history. During this time, global temperatures dropped rapidly, ice sheets advanced, and many regions experienced severe drought and environmental stress. The period ended just as suddenly as it began, with temperatures rising by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in some regions within just a few decades. This rapid climate change would have been catastrophic for human societies around the world. Communities that had adapted to warmer, wetter conditions would have found themselves struggling to survive in a much harsher environment. Trade networks would have collapsed, populations would have crashed, and much of the knowledge and technology accumulated over previous millennia might have been lost. When conditions improved at the end of the Younger Dryas, survivors would have had to rebuild their societies from whatever fragments they could salvage. The timing of the Younger Dryas corresponds remarkably well with the dates that appear in many ancient traditions. The Egyptian Göbekli Tepe, the flooding described in Mesopotamian myths, the advanced civilizations mentioned in Hindu and Buddhist texts, all are said to have ended around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Could these stories be preserving memories of real societies that flourished before the Younger Dryas and were then devastated by the climate catastrophe? Some researchers have suggested that the Younger Dryas was triggered by the impact of a comet or asteroid that exploded in the Earth's atmosphere around 12,900 years ago. This hypothetical impact would have generated massive fires, filled the atmosphere with dust and debris, and potentially triggered the rapid cooling that characterized the period. While the evidence for such an impact remains controversial, it's worth noting that many ancient traditions speak of fire falling from the sky, of the sun being hidden by darkness, and of other phenomena that might be consistent with a cosmic catastrophe. The Aboriginal Australians speak of a time when the sky fell and the world was remade. Native American traditions describe falling stars that brought destruction and transformation. Hindu texts tell of cosmic cycles that end in fire and renewal. Norse mythology speaks of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when fire and flood will destroy the world before it's reborn. These stories might be mythological ways of describing real astronomical events that had profound effects on human civilization. The reliability of oral tradition as a historical source is still debated among scholars, but recent studies have shown that carefully maintained oral histories can preserve accurate information over remarkable periods of time. The key is that the information must be considered important enough to memorize precisely and pass down carefully from generation to generation. Stories about catastrophic events that nearly destroyed humanity would certainly qualify as information worth preserving with care. The human brain is remarkably good at remembering stories, especially dramatic ones that involve strong emotions and vivid imagery. The flood myths and catastrophe legends that appear in cultures around the world have exactly the kind of memorable, emotionally charged content that would be likely to survive in oral tradition. They're not dry historical accounts, but powerful narratives that capture the imagination and stick in the memory long after they're first heard. Perhaps myths weren't made up to entertain, as we often assume today. Perhaps they were meant to warn future generations about the kinds of catastrophes that could befall human civilization. Perhaps they were attempts to preserve essential knowledge about how to survive and rebuild after global disasters. Perhaps they were the best way that pre-literate societies had to ensure that crucial information about their past would not be lost when written records didn't yet exist. The stories encoded in myth and legend may be our only windows into chapters of human history that left no other traces. If the archaeological record is fragmentary and incomplete, if most evidence of ancient achievement has long since decayed away, then oral traditions may preserve the only remaining clues about civilizations and events that would otherwise be completely unknown to us. As we continue to study ancient myths with new tools and perspectives, paying attention to their possible historical content rather than dismissing them as pure fantasy, we may discover that our ancestors were better historians than we ever imagined. They may have found ways to preserve memories of real events, real places, and real people across thousands of years and hundreds of generations, encoding truth in stories that continue to echo through time, waiting for us to learn how to decode their hidden messages. As we stand at the intersection of mystery and science, surrounded by the echoes of ancient achievements and the whispers of forgotten civilizations, it's important to take a step back and ask ourselves what these discoveries really mean. The massive stones of Baalbek, the submerged ruins off distant coasts, the precisely carved pillars of Göbekli Tepe, the controversial layers of Mount Padang, all of these enigmas challenge our understanding of the past, but they don't necessarily prove the extraordinary theories that often surround them. These anomalies are not proof of ancient aliens who visited Earth thousands of years ago, sharing advanced technology with primitive humans before departing for distant stars. They are not evidence of lost continents where super-civilizations possessed flying machines, laser-cutting tools, and anti-gravity devices. They are not confirmation that our ancestors had access to supernatural powers or mystical knowledge that defies the laws of physics. What they are, however, is something equally remarkable and perhaps even more important: proof of how little we actually know about the true capabilities and achievements of our own species. The tendency to invoke extraterrestrial explanations for ancient mysteries reflects a troubling assumption about human potential. When we see evidence of sophisticated engineering, precise astronomy, or complex planning in the archaeological record, why is our first instinct often to assume that humans couldn't have been responsible? This assumption sells our ancestors short, treating them as less intelligent, less capable, less creative than we are today. It suggests that innovation, ingenuity, and the drive to create something extraordinary are modern developments rather than fundamental aspects of human nature that have remained constant throughout our history. The reality is that humans 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, even 50,000 years ago possessed the same basic cognitive abilities that we do today. Their brains were essentially identical to ours, capable of the same kinds of abstract thinking, problem-solving, and creative leaps that characterize modern scientific and artistic achievement. What they lacked was not intelligence or imagination, but simply the accumulated knowledge base that each generation builds upon when it inherits the discoveries of its predecessors. When we look at ancient monuments and wonder how they were built, we're often comparing ancient capabilities with modern ones in ways that aren't entirely fair. We assume that because we would use cranes and computer modeling to move massive stones today, ancient peoples must have had access to similar technologies to accomplish the same tasks. But this assumption ignores the possibility that they developed completely different approaches, techniques that were perhaps more labor-intensive but equally effective for their purposes. Consider the question of how ancient peoples transported massive stones across long distances. Modern engineers focus on mechanical solutions involving wheels, pulleys, and motorized vehicles, but ancient societies had access to something that modern construction projects often lack: virtually unlimited human labor organized through social and religious systems that could motivate thousands of people to work together toward common goals. When an entire society believes that moving a particular stone is essential for their spiritual welfare or cultural identity, the engineering challenges become much more manageable. Recent experimental archaeology has shown that many of the techniques we thought were impossible with ancient tools are actually quite feasible when approached with patience, skill, and sufficient manpower. Teams of researchers have successfully moved multi-ton stones using only wooden rollers, ropes, and coordinated human effort. They've demonstrated that massive blocks can be carved with remarkable precision using stone tools, copper chisels, and abrasive materials that were readily available to ancient craftsmen. They've shown that complex astronomical alignments can be achieved through careful observation of celestial movements over long periods of time, and these experiments don't diminish the achievements of ancient builders, they actually make them more impressive. The precision and scale of ancient monuments become even more remarkable when we understand that they were accomplished through human skill and determination rather than mysterious technologies. The planning, organization, and sustained effort required to complete these projects speaks to sophisticated social systems and powerful cultural motivations that we're only beginning to appreciate. The resistance to accepting these human explanations for ancient achievements often stems from our modern relationship with technology and specialization. We live in a world where most people have deep knowledge in very narrow fields, where complex projects require teams of specialists with different types of expertise. The idea that ancient societies could have developed the broad range of skills needed for megalithic construction seems implausible to us because we've forgotten what humans are capable of when they're not constrained by modern divisions of labor. Ancient craftsmen weren't specialists in the way we understand the term today. A single individual might have been simultaneously a stone carver, an engineer, an astronomer, and a spiritual leader. The knowledge needed for monument construction wasn't compartmentalized into separate disciplines, but was integrated into comprehensive worldviews that connected practical skills with religious beliefs and cultural values. This integration may have actually made ancient peoples more effective at undertaking complex projects, since they didn't have to coordinate between multiple specialists who might have difficulty communicating across disciplinary boundaries. The astronomical knowledge evident at many ancient sites is often cited as evidence of impossible sophistication, but careful examination shows that this knowledge was well within the reach of careful observers working over long periods of time. The apparent complexity of ancient astronomical systems often reflects not advanced instrumentation, but rather the accumulated observations of many generations of skywatchers who noticed patterns, tracked cycles, and gradually built up detailed understanding of celestial movements. The precision of astronomical alignments at sites like Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, and various temple complexes around the world doesn't require advanced mathematical knowledge or sophisticated instruments. It requires patient observation, careful record-keeping, and the cultural commitment to maintain astronomical traditions across many generations. These are distinctly human capabilities that don't depend on technological development but on social organization and cultural continuity. Similarly, the engineering achievements visible at ancient sites don't necessarily indicate lost technologies but rather different approaches to solving construction problems. The precise fitting of massive stones at sites like Sacsayhuaman could have been achieved through time-consuming processes of trial fitting, careful measurement with simple tools, and the accumulated skill of craftsmen who devoted their entire careers to perfecting these techniques. The absence of obvious tool marks on some stones might indicate not the use of advanced cutting devices, but rather finishing techniques involving abrasion, polishing, and careful surface preparation that erased the traces of earlier rough work. Mainstream archaeology has sometimes been slow to incorporate these outlying discoveries into broader understanding of human development, but this caution is not necessarily a bad thing. Good science requires that extraordinary claims be supported by extraordinary evidence, and the archaeological community takes this responsibility seriously. The process of peer review, replication, and gradual acceptance of new ideas helps ensure that our understanding of the past is built on solid foundations rather than speculation and wishful thinking. The debates surrounding sites like Göbekli Tepe and Mount Padang demonstrate the healthy functioning of the scientific process. Initial discoveries generate excitement and sometimes over-enthusiastic interpretations. Subsequent research provides more careful analysis, better dating techniques, and more nuanced understanding of what the evidence actually shows. This back-and-forth process gradually builds a more accurate picture of the past, even if it sometimes means that the most exciting initial claims need to be modified or abandoned. The importance of interdisciplinary research becomes clear when we consider how many different types of evidence are relevant to understanding ancient sites. Archaeological excavation provides information about human artifacts and construction techniques. Geological analysis helps determine the age of different layers and the sources of building materials. Astronomical calculations can verify whether apparent alignments are intentional or coincidental. Climate research provides context about environmental conditions that ancient peoples would have faced. Anthropological studies of modern traditional societies offer insights into how complex projects might have been organized and motivated. The integration of these different approaches is essential for developing comprehensive understanding of ancient achievements. No single discipline has all the tools needed to fully interpret the evidence from mysterious sites. Archaeologists bring expertise in excavation and artifact analysis, but may lack the specialized knowledge needed to evaluate astronomical claims. Geologists understand the formation and dating of rock layers, but may not appreciate the cultural context that motivated ancient construction projects. Astronomers can calculate ancient sky positions with great precision, but may not understand the social and religious factors that made certain alignments important to ancient peoples. The growing recognition that human civilization may stretch back much further than previously thought doesn't require us to abandon scientific skepticism or embrace fringe theories. It simply means that we need to remain open to the possibility that our current understanding of the past is incomplete and subject to revision as new evidence emerges. The timeline of human development has been extended many times as new discoveries have pushed back the dates for various innovations and achievements. The development of agriculture, the domestication of animals, the creation of complex tools, the emergence of artistic expression, all of these milestones in human development have been repeatedly redated as archaeologists have discovered older and older examples. There's no reason to think that this process has ended, that we've now found the earliest examples of every important human innovation. Future discoveries may well reveal that our ancestors were accomplishing remarkable things even earlier than we currently believe possible. Scientific curiosity doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking or accepting every unusual claim without careful evaluation. It means approaching anomalous evidence with open minds while maintaining rigorous standards for what constitutes convincing proof. It means being willing to consider explanations that challenge conventional wisdom while insisting that such explanations be supported by solid evidence that can be independently verified. The goal is not to believe every strange theory that emerges from the study of ancient mysteries, but to remain brave enough to explore the ones that might actually lead to new understanding. This requires careful evaluation of evidence, consideration of alternative explanations, and the intellectual honesty to change our minds when the data demands it. It also requires the humility to admit that our current knowledge is limited and that future discoveries may reveal aspects of human history that we haven't yet imagined. The study of ancient mysteries serves several important functions beyond simply satisfying our curiosity about the past. It reminds us that human capabilities are not fixed or limited by current technological constraints. Our ancestors found ways to accomplish remarkable things using very different approaches from those we employ today. Understanding their methods and motivations might provide insights that could be useful for addressing modern challenges. The engineering principles evident at ancient sites might inspire new approaches to construction and architecture. The astronomical knowledge preserved in ancient monuments might offer insights into long-term celestial cycles that could be relevant for modern scientific research. The social organization required for massive construction projects might provide models for coordinating large-scale efforts to address contemporary problems like climate change or poverty. Perhaps most importantly, the study of ancient mysteries helps us maintain proper perspective on our place in human history. We are not the first generation to face complex challenges or to dream of accomplishing seemingly impossible things. Our ancestors dealt with environmental changes, social upheavals, and technical problems that were just as daunting in their context as the challenges we face today. They found ways to survive, adapt, and even thrive under conditions that would test the limits of human resilience. The monuments they left behind are more than just archaeological curiosities or tourist attractions. They are testaments to human determination, creativity, and the refusal to accept limitations. They remind us that every generation has the potential to accomplish things that previous generations thought impossible, and that the boundaries of human achievement are constantly being expanded by people who refuse to accept that something can't be done. The mysteries we've explored in these chapters, from the circular temples of Göbekli Tepe to the submerged cities beneath the waves, from the impossible stones of Baalbek to the controversial layers of Mount Padang, all share a common thread. They represent moments when human beings decided to attempt something extraordinary, something that pushed beyond the boundaries of what was considered possible in their time. The fact that we're still puzzling over how they accomplished these feats thousands of years later is perhaps the greatest tribute to their vision and determination. The goal isn't to believe every strange theory about the past, but to remain brave enough to explore the ones that don't yet fit comfortably within our current understanding. Science advances not by confirming what we already know, but by investigating the anomalies and outliers that don't fit established patterns. The ancient mysteries we've examined may eventually find conventional explanations, or they may force us to revise our understanding of human capabilities and achievements. Either outcome represents progress in our ongoing effort to understand who we are and where we came from. As we continue to develop new technologies for exploring and analyzing ancient sites, from satellite imagery that can reveal hidden structures to DNA analysis that can trace ancient population movements, we can expect that our picture of the past will continue to evolve and become more complex. The simple linear progression from primitive to advanced that once characterized our understanding of human development has already given way to a more nuanced recognition that ancient peoples were capable of remarkable achievements that we're only beginning to appreciate. The ancient mysteries that surround us are not obstacles to understanding but invitations to expand our knowledge. They remind us that the past is not a closed book but an ongoing investigation, and that every new discovery has the potential to reveal aspects of human history that we never suspected. The echoes in the stone are still speaking to us, if we have the wisdom to listen and the courage to follow where they lead. The future of uncovering our hidden past has never looked more promising. As we stand on the threshold of a new era in archaeological discovery, armed with technologies that would have seemed like magic to previous generations of researchers, we're beginning to peer deeper into the shadows of human history than ever before. The tools emerging from laboratories and engineering workshops around the world are not just improving our ability to find and analyze ancient sites, they're fundamentally changing what we thought was possible to discover about civilizations that vanished thousands of years ago. Light detection and ranging technology, known as LiDAR, has revolutionized our ability to see through the dense vegetation that conceals so many archaeological treasures. From aircraft flying high above the jungle canopy, LiDAR systems fire millions of laser pulses toward the ground below, measuring the tiny variations in the time it takes for each pulse to return. Advanced computer algorithms can then filter out the reflections from leaves and branches, revealing the bare earth surface beneath with extraordinary precision and detail. The results have been nothing short of miraculous. In the jungles of Guatemala, LiDAR surveys have revealed vast Maya cities that were completely hidden beneath centuries of forest growth, with pyramids, palaces, causeways, and agricultural terraces sprawling across landscapes that appeared empty to ground-based surveys. In Cambodia, similar technology has mapped the full extent of Angkor, showing that it was not just a collection of temples, but the center of a massive urban complex that may have housed over 1 million people at its peak. But LiDAR's greatest gift to archaeology may be its ability to detect subtle changes in ground elevation that indicate buried structures. Ancient walls create slight rises in the landscape, while filled-in moats and ditches leave corresponding depressions. Building foundations alter drainage patterns in ways that affect vegetation growth for centuries after the structures themselves have crumbled away. LiDAR can detect these faint signatures with such sensitivity that archaeologists can now map entire buried cities without turning a single shovel of earth. The technology is becoming more sophisticated and accessible each year. What once required expensive aircraft and specialized operators can now be accomplished with drones carrying miniaturized LiDAR systems that cost a fraction of the original equipment. Satellites equipped with advanced radar systems can peer through jungle canopies from space, mapping archaeological features across entire continents. The combination of these different scales of observation, from handheld scanners to orbital platforms, is creating unprecedented opportunities for discovery. Ground-penetrating radar has evolved from crude instruments that could barely distinguish between rocks and empty space to sophisticated systems that can create detailed three-dimensional images of buried structures. Modern radar systems can detect variations in soil density, moisture content, and electrical conductivity that reveal not just the presence of buried walls and foundations, but also their construction materials, their state of preservation, and even details about their internal architecture. The latest radar systems can penetrate much deeper into the ground than their predecessors, reaching depths of 30 meters or more in favorable conditions. This expanded range is opening up possibilities for discovering much older sites that have been buried under thick layers of sediment accumulated over thousands of years. The deepest layers detected at Mount Padang, the controversial findings that suggested construction activities stretching back 20,000 years, were revealed through just this kind of deep, penetrating radar survey. Perhaps even more exciting is the development of radar systems that can be deployed from space, using satellite platforms to survey vast areas of the Earth's surface for signs of buried archaeological features. These orbital radar systems are particularly effective in desert environments, where the dry conditions allow radio waves to penetrate deep into the ground and where the absence of vegetation eliminates interference from surface clutter. DNA analysis has opened entirely new windows into the human past, allowing researchers to trace the movements and interactions of ancient populations with unprecedented precision. But the most exciting recent development has been the discovery that genetic material can be extracted not just from bones and teeth, but from soil samples taken from archaeological sites. This environmental DNA, or eDNA, preserves traces of all the organisms that lived and died in a particular location, creating a kind of genetic archive that can be read thousands of years after the original inhabitants departed. Soil samples from ancient settlement sites contain DNA from the humans who lived there, but also from the animals they hunted and domesticated, the plants they cultivated and gathered, and even the microorganisms that lived in their guts and shaped their health and nutrition. By analyzing this environmental DNA, researchers can reconstruct not just who lived at ancient sites, but what they ate, what diseases they suffered from, how they interacted with their environment, and how their populations changed over time. The technique is so sensitive that it can detect the presence of specific human populations, even at sites where no bones or artifacts have been preserved. Environmental DNA has revealed human occupation at sites in North America that are much older than any previously known archaeological evidence, pushing back the timeline of human arrival in the Americas and challenging long-held theories about when and how the continents were first populated. Artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are being trained to recognize archaeological features in satellite images, aerial photographs, and ground-based surveys with accuracy that often exceeds human capabilities. These AI systems can process vast amounts of imagery much faster than human analysts, identifying potential archaeological sites across entire countries or continents in a matter of days or weeks, rather than the years or decades that manual surveys would require. The AI systems are becoming increasingly sophisticated in their ability to recognize different types of archaeological features. They can distinguish between natural geological formations and human-made structures, identify specific architectural styles and construction techniques, and even estimate the age and cultural affiliation of sites based on their visible characteristics. As these systems are trained on larger and larger data sets of known archaeological sites, their accuracy and reliability continue to improve. Perhaps most importantly, AI analysis is revealing patterns and connections that human researchers might never have noticed. Machine learning algorithms can identify subtle similarities between sites that are separated by vast distances or long periods of time, suggesting cultural connections and influences that traditional archaeological analysis might have missed. They can detect gradual changes in architectural styles or settlement patterns that reflect long-term cultural evolution or environmental adaptation. The democratization of archaeological technology is creating opportunities for discovery that extend far beyond professional research institutions. High-resolution satellite imagery is now freely available through internet platforms, allowing amateur researchers around the world to scan for potential archaeological sites from their home computers. Drone technology has become affordable enough that local communities can conduct their own aerial surveys of areas that interest them. This citizen science approach to archaeology has already led to numerous important discoveries. Amateur researchers scanning satellite images have identified previously unknown Roman forts, medieval settlements, and ancient field systems. Local communities in many parts of the world are using simple GPS units and smartphones to document archaeological sites in their areas, creating databases of cultural heritage that would have been impossible to compile through traditional academic surveys. The collaboration between professional archaeologists and local communities is becoming increasingly important as researchers recognize that indigenous peoples and traditional communities often possess detailed knowledge about archaeological sites that has been passed down through oral traditions for generations. This traditional knowledge can guide researchers to important sites and provide cultural context that helps interpret archaeological findings. In many parts of the world, indigenous communities are taking the lead in documenting and protecting their own archaeological heritage, using modern technology to preserve traditional knowledge and ensure that their ancestors' stories are recorded for future generations. These community-based projects are revealing aspects of human history that might otherwise have been lost as traditional cultures adapt to rapidly changing modern conditions. The integration of different types of archaeological evidence is being facilitated by new database systems and analytical tools that can handle vast amounts of information from multiple sources. Researchers can now combine data from excavations, surveys, satellite imagery, environmental samples, and historical documents in ways that reveal patterns and connections that would be invisible when each type of evidence is analyzed separately. These integrated approaches are particularly powerful for studying large-scale questions about human migration, cultural exchange, and environmental adaptation. By combining genetic data with archaeological evidence and paleoclimatic information, researchers can trace how human populations moved across landscapes over thousands of years, how they adapted to changing environmental conditions, and how they influenced and were influenced by the ecosystems they inhabited. The preservation of archaeological sites is becoming increasingly urgent as climate change, urban development, and industrial activity threaten to destroy irreplaceable evidence of human history. Rising sea levels are eroding coastal sites around the world, while increased storm activity and changing precipitation patterns are accelerating the deterioration of structures that have survived for thousands of years. In many parts of the world, rapid economic development is destroying archaeological sites faster than they can be properly documented and studied. Digital preservation technologies are providing new ways to document and protect archaeological heritage, even when the physical sites themselves cannot be saved. Three-dimensional scanning systems can create detailed digital models of ancient structures that preserve every architectural detail with millimeter precision. Virtual reality systems allow people to explore and experience ancient sites even after they have been destroyed or made inaccessible by conflict or environmental change. These digital preservation efforts are creating vast virtual libraries of human heritage that will be available to researchers and the public for generations to come. Students will be able to walk through ancient temples, examine artifacts in minute detail, and experience historical environments in ways that would be impossible through traditional museum displays or textbook illustrations. The analysis of ancient materials is being revolutionized by new techniques that can extract information from smaller and smaller samples without damaging precious artifacts. Portable X-ray fluorescence devices can analyze the chemical composition of metals, ceramics, and stone tools in the field, providing immediate information about where materials originated and how they were processed. Mass spectrometry techniques can identify organic compounds in ancient pottery that reveal what foods were cooked and stored in the vessels. Isotope analysis of human and animal bones can reveal details about ancient diets, migration patterns, and environmental conditions with remarkable precision. The chemical signatures preserved in teeth and bones reflect the geology, climate, and ecology of the places where individuals lived during different periods of their lives, allowing researchers to trace movements and identify immigrants in ancient populations. Advanced dating techniques are pushing back the boundaries of what can be reliably dated and improving the precision with which we can establish chronologies for ancient events. Radiocarbon dating, the workhorse of archaeological chronology, is becoming more precise and can now work with much smaller samples than were previously required. New calibration methods are improving the accuracy of radiocarbon dates, while additional dating techniques based on different physical and chemical processes are providing independent checks on chronological interpretations. Optically stimulated luminescence dating can determine when sediments were last exposed to sunlight, providing dates for the burial of archaeological layers, even when no organic material is available for radiocarbon analysis. Paleomagnetic dating uses changes in the Earth's magnetic field to date archaeological features, while amino acid racemization can provide age estimates for organic materials that are too old for radiocarbon dating. The study of ancient DNA is revealing the complex genetic heritage of modern human populations and providing insights into how our species spread across the globe and adapted to different environments. Ancient genetic material is being recovered from increasingly old specimens, with DNA from Neanderthals and other extinct human species providing information about our evolutionary history and the interactions between different human populations. Environmental DNA is revealing how ancient landscapes and ecosystems changed over time, showing how human activities influenced natural environments and how environmental changes affected human societies. This ecological perspective on human history is helping researchers understand the long-term relationships between people and the natural world, providing lessons that may be relevant for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. The growing recognition that the story of human civilization may stretch back tens of thousands of years more than we previously thought is inspiring new research projects and challenging long-held assumptions about human capabilities and achievements. Archaeological teams are investigating older and older sites using increasingly sophisticated techniques to detect traces of human activity that might have been overlooked by earlier generations of researchers. Re-examining solved sites with new eyes and technology is revealing that many supposedly well-understood archaeological locations still hold secrets that can change our interpretation of their significance. The application of new analytical techniques to artifacts and samples that have been stored in museum collections for decades is providing fresh insights into ancient technologies, trade relationships, and cultural practices. The collaborative work between indigenous communities and archaeologists is ensuring that traditional knowledge and perspectives are incorporated into archaeological interpretations, providing richer and more complete understanding of ancient cultures. This collaboration is particularly important for interpreting the spiritual and cultural significance of archaeological sites, aspects of human heritage that cannot be understood through material evidence alone. Theoretical frameworks for understanding human cultural evolution are being revised to accommodate evidence that suggests our ancestors were capable of much more sophisticated achievements than previously believed. The recognition that complex societies could emerge and flourish without the technological foundation that we once thought was necessary is forcing researchers to reconsider fundamental assumptions about how civilizations develop and what factors contribute to their success or failure. Educational institutions are developing new programs that integrate traditional archaeological training with expertise in emerging technologies, preparing the next generation of researchers to take advantage of the powerful tools that are becoming available. Students are learning to use drones, satellite imagery, and advanced analytical equipment as standard parts of their archaeological toolkit. Public engagement with archaeology is being enhanced by digital technologies that allow people around the world to participate in the discovery and interpretation of archaeological sites. Online platforms enable volunteers to help analyze satellite imagery, transcribe historical documents, and even participate in virtual excavations using detailed three-dimensional models of archaeological sites. The future of archaeological discovery promises to be more exciting, more inclusive, and more revelatory than ever before. As new technologies continue to emerge and existing techniques become more powerful and accessible, we can expect that our understanding of human history will continue to evolve and expand. The past is not fixed or fully known, but rather an ongoing frontier of discovery that continues to surprise and inspire us with evidence of human creativity, resilience, and achievement. Every new technique that's developed, every new site that's discovered, every new piece of evidence that's analyzed has the potential to reveal aspects of our shared human heritage that we never suspected existed. The echoes of ancient civilizations continue to speak to us across the millennia, and we're finally developing the tools and techniques needed to hear their voices clearly and understand their messages. The next chapter in the human story is being written not just by professional archaeologists in universities and museums, but by communities around the world who are using modern technology to explore and preserve their own heritage. This democratization of archaeological discovery ensures that the full diversity of human experience will be represented in our understanding of the past, and that the stories of all peoples and cultures will have the opportunity to be heard and remembered. As we look toward the future, it's clear that the boundary between past and present is becoming increasingly fluid. The technologies we're developing to understand ancient civilizations are also providing insights that may help us address contemporary challenges. The resilience and adaptability that allowed our ancestors to survive and thrive through dramatic environmental and social changes may offer lessons for navigating the uncertainties of our own rapidly changing world. The ancient mysteries that have captured our imagination throughout this journey are not just puzzles to be solved or curiosities to be satisfied. They are reminders that human potential is not limited by current circumstances or conventional wisdom, and that every generation has the opportunity to accomplish things that previous generations thought impossible. The echoes in the stone continue to inspire us to reach beyond what we think we know and to remain open to the possibility that the most amazing discoveries still lie ahead of us, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to look beyond the surface and dig deeper into the mysteries of our shared human past. As the first light of dawn touches the horizon and the stars begin to fade into the growing brightness of day, we find ourselves at the end of a journey that has taken us across continents and through millennia, following the faint traces of civilizations that time tried to erase but could not completely destroy. We have walked among the ancient stones of Göbekli Tepe, felt the weight of impossible megaliths at Baalbek, dove beneath the waves to explore drowned cities, and peered through the mists of time to glimpse shadows of achievements that challenge everything we thought we knew about our past. The story we have uncovered together is not one of ancient aliens or lost super technologies, but something far more remarkable and inspiring, evidence that human creativity, ingenuity, and determination have been constant companions throughout our entire history as a species. The monuments and mysteries we have explored are testimonies to minds that refuse to accept limitations, to communities that worked together towards seemingly impossible goals, to individuals who looked at massive stones and saw not obstacles but opportunities to create something beautiful and enduring. There may have been cities before the cities we know, rising from landscapes that are now lost beneath the waves or buried under centuries of sediment and vegetation. These early urban centers might have been different from the settlements we're familiar with from recorded history, built with different materials, organized according to different principles, but no less sophisticated in their own ways. Their inhabitants might have developed technologies and techniques that we haven't yet rediscovered, approaches to engineering and construction that were perfectly suited to their environment and resources, but leave few traces for modern archaeologists to find. Picture these lost cities in your mind as you drift towards sleep. Imagine settlements built along ancient coastlines where the Mediterranean Sea once stretched much further inland, where rivers that have long since changed course carried fresh water through valleys now submerged beneath hundreds of feet of ocean. These cities might have been built from wood and reed, from mud brick and thatch, materials that were abundant and renewable but which decay completely within a few centuries of abandonment. Their buildings might have been tall and graceful, designed to capture cooling breezes and channel away the heat of the sun, decorated with paintings and carvings that depicted their understanding of the natural world and their place within it. The people who lived in these vanished cities might have been master navigators, sailing vessels that could cross vast expanses of open ocean using only the stars, the wind patterns, and the flight paths of seabirds as their guides. They might have developed sophisticated systems of trade and communication that connected distant shores, exchanging not just goods and materials but ideas and innovations that spread from community to community like seeds carried on the wind. Their merchants might have traveled routes that we can no longer trace, their settlements connected by sea lanes that are now dry land, or shipping channels that are now mountain valleys. There may have been temples before the temples we recognize, sacred spaces where our ancestors gathered to contemplate their place in the cosmos and to celebrate the mysteries of existence. These early religious sites might have been oriented according to astronomical observations that we're only beginning to understand, designed to capture and focus spiritual energies that ancient peoples perceived but modern science struggles to measure. The rituals that took place in these sacred spaces might have preserved knowledge and wisdom that was later encoded in myths and legends when the original contexts were forgotten. Envision these ancient temples as places of profound beauty and meaning, where every architectural detail was imbued with symbolic significance and cosmic purpose. The placement of each stone, the orientation of each doorway, The alignment of each pillar might have been calculated to mark important celestial events or to channel the energy of the earth itself. These sacred spaces might have served as schools where knowledge was transmitted from generation to generation, libraries where information was preserved in the patterns of dance and song, observatories where careful watchers tracked the movements of the heavens and recorded their observations in stone and story. The priests and priestesses who maintained these temples might have been the keepers of humanity's earliest scientific knowledge, preserving understanding of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and agriculture within religious frameworks that ensured the information would be carefully protected and accurately transmitted. Their ceremonies might have encoded complex calendrical calculations, their prayers might have contained detailed botanical knowledge, their chants might have preserved historical records that stretched back for thousands of years. There may have been names we'll never speak, languages we'll never hear, stories we'll never fully understand. Entire cultures might have flourished and vanished, leaving behind only the most durable fragments of their achievements. The people who created these vanished civilizations had hopes and dreams, fears and aspirations, just as we do today. They loved their children, mourned their dead, celebrated their achievements, and worried about their futures. They were fully human in every sense, possessed of the same fundamental capacities for wonder, creativity, and transcendence that characterize our species today. Think of these forgotten peoples as you settle into sleep. Imagine their daily lives unfolding in landscapes that we can barely reconstruct. They woke each morning to sunrises that illuminated familiar horizons. They worked and played and loved in environments that felt as permanent and enduring to them as our modern world feels to us. They developed complex social relationships, created intricate systems of meaning and value, told stories that explained their origins and guided their behavior. They faced challenges and solved problems, celebrated victories and endured defeats, just as humans have always done throughout history. Their children played games that we might recognize, learned skills that prepared them for adult responsibilities, listened to stories that connected them with the achievements and wisdom of their ancestors. Their artists created works of beauty that moved and inspired their contemporaries. Their craftsmen developed techniques that were passed down through generations of careful practice and patient refinement. Their leaders made decisions that affected the welfare of their communities. Their innovators developed new approaches to persistent problems. Their dreamers imagined possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of current understanding. But their stones remain, buried under layers of earth and time, broken by earthquakes and erosion, scattered by wars and natural disasters, but somehow still present, still waiting to tell their stories to anyone patient enough to listen. These stone witnesses have survived ice ages and climate changes, the rise and fall of empires, the transformation of landscapes and coastlines. They have outlasted the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, the Classical period and the Dark Ages, the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. They continue to endure in our modern world of steel and concrete, digital technology and space exploration. The endurance of these ancient stones reminds us that some forms of human achievement transcend the particular circumstances of their creation. The vision that motivated the builders of Göbekli Tepe, the engineering skill that enabled the construction of Sacsayhuaman, the astronomical knowledge that guided the alignment of countless monuments around the world, all of these represent aspects of human capability that are not limited to any particular historical period or technological level. Each carved pillar tells a story of human hands that shaped stone with patient skill, of eyes that observed the natural world with careful attention, of minds that conceived patterns and meanings that connected earthly activities with cosmic rhythms. Each precisely fitted block represents hours of careful measurement and adjustment, of trial and error, of the gradual accumulation of technical knowledge that enabled ever more ambitious projects. Each carefully aligned monument speaks of generations of observers who tracked the movements of celestial bodies, who noticed patterns and cycles, who developed increasingly sophisticated understanding of the mechanics of the universe. These achievements were not the work of isolated geniuses, but of entire communities working together toward common goals. The construction of megalithic monuments required the coordination of many different types of expertise: quarrying and stoneworking, transportation and lifting, surveying and alignment, decoration, and finishing. It required social organization sophisticated enough to mobilize large numbers of workers and sustain them throughout long construction projects. It required cultural systems that could motivate people to contribute their labor to projects that might not be completed within their lifetimes. Imagine the planning sessions that must have preceded these great constructions, the discussions about materials and methods, the calculations of time and resources needed to complete the work. Picture the quarries where master stone workers taught their apprentices to read the grain of the rock, to find the natural fracture lines that would allow massive blocks to be separated with minimum effort and maximum precision. Envision the workshops where specialized tools were crafted and maintained, where techniques were refined and improved through countless repetitions. Think of the moment when the first foundation stones were laid, when theoretical plans became physical reality, when abstract visions began to take concrete form. Imagine the satisfaction of the builders as they watched their project grow day by day, stone by stone, as their collective effort gradually transformed raw materials into enduring monuments. Picture the ceremonies that might have marked important milestones in the construction, the celebrations that recognized the completion of major phases, the rituals that blessed the finished structures and dedicated them to their intended purposes. The astronomical alignments evident at many ancient sites suggest that our ancestors were careful observers of the natural world, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars with precision that rivals modern measurements. This knowledge was not merely academic, but was integrated into practical and spiritual aspects of daily life. The timing of agricultural activities, religious ceremonies, and social gatherings was coordinated with celestial events in ways that connected human communities with the larger rhythms of the cosmos. Consider the patience required for such astronomical observations, the dedication needed to maintain careful records over decades or centuries. Imagine the watchers who spent countless nights on high places, tracking the subtle changes in the positions of stars and planets, noting the variations in the length of days and the height of the sun at different seasons. Picture the systems they developed for recording and preserving their observations, the ways they encoded complex cyclical information in forms that could be remembered and transmitted accurately from generation to generation. The precision of ancient construction techniques indicates that our ancestors possessed sophisticated understanding of mathematics, geometry, and engineering principles. They could calculate angles and proportions, design stable structures, and solve complex logistical problems. This knowledge was not necessarily recorded in written form, but was embedded in practical traditions that were passed down from master craftsmen to apprentices through hands-on training and long experience. Envision the workshops where this knowledge was developed and transmitted, where young apprentices learned to use simple tools to achieve remarkable precision, where experienced masters shared the secrets of their crafts through demonstration and patient instruction. Picture the experiments and innovations that gradually improved construction techniques, the trial and error process that led to better methods for cutting, shaping, and joining massive stones. Imagine the pride that craftsmen took in their work, the satisfaction of creating something that would endure long after their own lives had ended. The global distribution of similar construction techniques and architectural principles suggests that certain approaches to monumental building represent fundamental solutions to universal human needs and desires. The tendency to build with massive stones, to align structures with astronomical events, to create spaces for communal gathering and ritual, appears to emerge independently in many different cultures and historical periods. This suggests that these architectural traditions reflect something deep in human nature, some fundamental drive to create permanent expressions of temporary communities and fleeting insights. This universality of monumental building traditions speaks to shared aspects of human psychology and spirituality that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. Across all known societies, humans have felt the need to create structures that outlast individual lives, to mark important places with permanent monuments, to align their constructions with the larger patterns of the natural world. These impulses seem to be as fundamental to human nature as language, art, or music. As we continue to develop new technologies for archaeological discovery and analysis, we can expect that our understanding of these ancient achievements will continue to evolve and expand. Each new technique for dating ancient materials, each new method for analyzing construction techniques, each new approach to interpreting astronomical alignments has the potential to reveal aspects of ancient knowledge that we never suspected existed. The recognition that sophisticated human societies might have existed much earlier than we previously believed should make us humble about our assumptions and excited about future discoveries. The timeline of human achievement has been repeatedly extended as new evidence has emerged, and there's no reason to think that this process has ended. Future archaeological discoveries may reveal that our ancestors were accomplishing remarkable things even further back in time than we currently imagine possible. The study of ancient mysteries also provides perspective on our own historical moment. We are not the first generation to face complex challenges or to attempt seemingly impossible projects. Our ancestors dealt with environmental changes, social upheavals, and technological limitations that were just as daunting in their context as the challenges we face today. They found ways to create beauty and meaning under conditions that would test the limits of human resilience and creativity. The monuments they left behind are more than historical curiosities or tourist attractions. They are reminders that human potential is not fixed or limited by current circumstances. Every generation has the capacity to accomplish things that previous generations thought impossible, and the boundaries of human achievement are constantly being expanded by people who refuse to accept that something cannot be done. The echoes in the stone speak to us across thousands of years, carrying messages about human creativity, determination, and the desire to create something that will outlast our brief individual lives. These messages are not always easy to decode, and we may never fully understand all the intentions and meanings that were embedded in ancient monuments, but the effort to understand them connects us with our ancestors in fundamental ways, reminding us that we are part of a continuous story of human achievement that stretches back to the very beginning of our species. The truth of our origins may not lie ahead of us, in future discoveries or technological developments, but behind us, in the deep past where our ancestors left traces of capabilities and achievements that we're only beginning to appreciate. These traces are often subtle, easily overlooked, requiring patient investigation and careful analysis to reveal their significance. They lie just out of reach of conventional understanding, beneath the dust of accumulated time, beneath the waves of risen seas, beneath our comfortable assumptions about what ancient peoples could and could not accomplish. But they are there, waiting for us to develop the tools and techniques needed to uncover them, waiting for us to ask the right questions and look in the right places. The past is not a closed book, but an ongoing investigation, and every new discovery has the potential to change our understanding of who we are and where we came from. The ancient mysteries that surround us are not obstacles to knowledge, but invitations to expand our understanding, reminders that the most important discoveries often come from questioning what we think we already know. As the stars fade into the growing light of a new day, as the ancient stones continue their silent vigil over landscapes that have changed beyond recognition since they were first raised, we are reminded that we are both inheritors and creators of human heritage. We inherit the achievements and wisdom of countless previous generations, but we also have the responsibility to add our own contributions to the ongoing story of human accomplishment. The echoes in the stone will continue to speak to future generations, just as they speak to us today, carrying forward the message that human potential is limitless and that every age has the opportunity to accomplish wonders that will inspire and amaze those who come after. Time itself becomes our companion in this quest for understanding, not an enemy that destroys evidence, but an ally that preserves the most important truths in forms that can survive any catastrophe. The stones remember what we have forgotten, the landscapes hold secrets that we are only beginning to decode, and the earth itself serves as a vast library of human achievement waiting for those with the patience and skill to read its hidden messages. The world before history was not empty or primitive, but rich with human achievement and aspiration. It was a world where our ancestors accomplished things that still inspire us today, where they created monuments that continue to challenge our understanding, where they developed knowledge and techniques that we are only now beginning to rediscover and appreciate. This world is not lost but hidden, not destroyed but waiting, not beyond our reach, but just beneath the surface of our current understanding, ready to reveal its secrets to those brave enough to dig deeper into the mysteries of our shared human past. In this world before history, every sunrise brought new possibilities, every generation inherited the accumulated wisdom of their ancestors and added their own discoveries to the growing treasury of human knowledge. The builders of these ancient monuments worked not just with stone and wood, but with hope and vision, creating structures that would serve as bridges between their time and ours, carrying messages across the vast expanse of centuries that separate us from them. As you close your eyes and let sleep carry you into dreams, remember that you are connected to these ancient builders by the unbroken chain of human experience. The same creativity that moved them to create beauty from raw stone, the same curiosity that drove them to study the movements of the stars, the same determination that enabled them to accomplish seemingly impossible feats. These qualities live on in you and in every human being who has ever looked up at the night sky and wondered about their place in the vast cosmos that surrounds us all.